So, you've started a podcast and it's got a good initial response. You must be wondering, is there a way to make money from my small podcast? There is, but only if you choose the right money making channels. Today, we're going to discuss two things. Can your podcast make money? If it can, what kind of money making channel should you choose based on the type of podcast that you have? So, stick around. So, the first question is whether your podcast can make money. And to answer that question, we need to answer three things. And some of them are going to come from the data belonging to your show. How many monthly downloads do you get? If you're lucky, it will be in the hundreds or maybe even thousands every month. Not so lucky, or perhaps a relatively new show, it might be a few dozen every month. Now, if you're getting less than a few hundred downloads a month, like maybe less than 200 or 300 downloads, we would recommend not trying to monetize the show right now. It's too small, you won't make that much money, and anything that you really do try in terms of monetizing is a bit of a distraction for your listeners and potentially an irritant as well. So the trade off here is annoying people and making money. The second thing that you need to figure out, and again from your data, is how loyal are your listeners. And for doing this, we recommend a metric that we made up, I would say, is the ratio of listens to followers. So, how many listens are you getting divided by how many followers do you have? And if that ratio is high, like for example, you're getting 500 listens and you have 100 followers, then that is good news because it means probably all of your followers are listening. And then there are a lot of other people who are not your followers, subscribers, etc., who are also listening to your show. And that is good. On the other hand, let's say you have 500 followers, but you're only getting 50 listens for any episode. Not only are you not getting new listeners, your existing people who actually are following you and should be quite engaged with your show, most of them are not listening either. And that is bad news because it means that your followers or your subscribers are not loyal. And ideally, you want a loyal audience. However, all is not lost. You can still make money with less loyalty as well. But this is something that you need to know. Another thing in relation to loyalty, and more importantly, on the quality of your content, is to look at your consumption data. Now, this information is not going to be available on your podcast hosting account. However, it will be available on your Spotify or your Apple. And that for every episode will take the form of a line graph. And the line graph will be descending from the left to the right. It will start out with 100% and it will end at some percent, which could be higher or lower, depending on how engaging your content is. Now, what this consumption graph tells you is how many people who started the episode have continued listening through to it through the entire course of the episode. So let's say you had 50 listeners for your episode. The front of the graph will show 100% because all 50 started the episode, and then it will gradually drop off. Now, if your episode is a really strong one that resonated well with the audience, you might find that 50% of your listeners have listened all the way through. On the other hand, if your content is weak or not resonating with your audience, the wrong people are listening to it, you might find that it tapers out to being just 10% or 5% or something like that. So, you need to know whether your content is resonating with your audience or not. And if it is strong, there's a lot of people who are continuing through till the end, you have a good thing going. And this also leads to a loyal and engaged audience. The last point you need to know with regard to statistics and data is how valuable are your listeners likely to be and to whom. So, the easiest way to figure this out is to decide what content it is that you have. So, let's say you run a personal finance show. So, all the people who are listening to your episodes are people interested in personal finance. By default, affluent and valuable audience. Because these are people who are willing to invest money or spend money on something and they want to grow their wealth. So, many companies would love to get access to this audience, primarily banks and financial services companies. And so, therefore, this is a relatively well heeled audience, and there are obvious people who want to sponsor content that reaches this audience in the hope of being able to sell them something from their side. So, therefore, your content determines a lot how valuable your audience is and to whom. The second way of determining value of your audience, little bit roundabout, but you can go into your Spotify statistics and look for the demographic data. And if the demographic data will show you things like age and gender and stuff like that, so you might find that a lot of your audience members are people who are at an age where they have young children. So you can take a guess that maybe this audience is valuable to toy companies or to education companies or people who are trying to cater to parents in some way. So therefore, this is a mid value sort of an audience, and for certain kinds of people, probably quite high value as well. On the other hand, you might find that your audience skews younger. So maybe they are all in the range of, let's say, teens to early 20s. And the content of your show also is geared towards maybe topics that are of interest to this group. Now, it could also be that this group doesn't have much disposable income or is not willing to spend on things in general. And so, therefore, they may be overall low value as an audience. But never fear, there is a way to make money from such people as well. But it's good for you to know and understand and make a judgment as to how valuable your audience is. Now that you've figured out how engaged your audience is and also how valuable they might be, there is a way to figure out what kind of things might be the best money making channels for your particular audience. And to do this, we need to visualize this in the form of a grid with two axes. The first axis is engagement, the second axis is value. So by doing this, you can make a grid with four cells: high engagement, high value, low engagement, low value, and high engagement, low value, low engagement, high value. And each of these cells has a certain way that you can try to monetize them. So let's dive in. The first grid is high engagement, high value listeners. If you've got this, you're sitting on gold. What this means is your listeners are people who have money and are potentially willing to spend it, and they are extremely devoted to your show. So they are hanging on your every word and tuning into every episode and listening to all of it. This is ideal. So you can monetize these people in almost any way that you think deem fit. So one is you can get sponsors, especially if you have a few more followers or something like that. Sponsors will be willing to sponsor your episodes, so you can just read out their message and they'll pay you something for it. Other ways which don't involve sponsorship could be for you to create premium access. So there are certain episodes that you only release on payment, and only those who pay will be able to access that. You could create online courses or workshops which people will then pay to attend. You could also do consultancy or coaching or offer services, or if you're a business owner, then ask people to check out your business services and so on. So, with an audience that has money and is devoted to your show, you can actually ask them to pay for privileged access to things, whether it is one on one, cohorted, unique content, or anything of the sort. Even if you have a small audience, you're probably likely to make at least some money relatively early in your podcasting journey. The second category here is high engagement but low value listeners. So, what this means is these people may not have a lot of money, but they're very devoted to your show and they're strong followers of your show. So, what can you offer to them that they may be willing to buy? Now, because they don't have a lot of money, you can't offer them big ticket things or ask them to pay for content or something like that, because chances are they won't be able to. However, you can sell them one off items which allow them to advertise their affiliation with you and your show. So, as an example, you could sell merchandise, t shirts, mugs, stickers, things like that, which are relatively inexpensive things which they can buy to show you their support. Another kind of thing that you could do is solicit donations or tips. You can do that through Patreon or Ko-Fi. And these are services where people can just give you a few dollars each, or maybe a few dollars each month, just to support you. It doesn't really break the bank for them either. So these kinds of things might work well for this kind of an audience. Another way that you could try to monetize this kind of a group is by hosting live ticketed events. So maybe you organize a get together and people have to pay a little bit to sign up and arrive. Maybe you give a talk and then people can come and pay to listen to you give that talk. These are one off kind of things, not necessarily very expensive. And again, people do it to show you their support because they are so devoted to you and the content that you're sharing with them. The third category here is low engagement but high value. So these are people with money, but they aren't really crazy about your show. They may listen to only a couple of episodes and then not listen for a long time and so on. So these kinds of people, because they're not really that attached to you, you need to try to capture some monetization the few times that they engage with your show. And the way to do that would be to have affiliate links. So, for example, if you're reviewing something or mentioning something, you could give a link to that and earn a little bit of an affiliate commission in case they follow the link and buy something over there. You could ask for sponsorships. So, if your listener base is large enough, then you could ask a local service provider or something to sponsor a couple of episodes where their name gets out into the world and you make a little bit of money because you're getting people who may be able to afford the services of that sponsor. Another altogether different thing over here could be that you believe that you have a library of good quality content. It's just that you're not being able to hook people and keep them on your show. So if you have a lot of back catalog, you could consider licensing this back catalog to someone else who has the audience and is going to be able to make better use of all of this material. So you could get some sort of a royalty from them or a lump sum payment for allowing them to host all of your content on their platform. The last category over here is low engagement listeners who are also low value. And to be honest, especially given that your show is not large, you're probably better off in trying to improve the engagement of your listeners. Try to make better quality content, understand what resonates with people, and try to get people to follow you, to listen to all of your episodes, to increase their consumption of your episodes. If you can do that, then you move into a different category, which is high engagement, low value, and you can still monetize over there. But if your listeners are low engagement and low value, there's not really much that you can do here other than maybe running programmatic ads. You could set up some sort of an auto ad placement kind of thing. There are such services, and it will play an ad in the middle of your episode and you'll get paid a little bit. But because you don't have too many listeners, chances are that you really only will make pennies. So it may not be worth the irritation value to your listener, especially given that they're already not particularly engaged. So, as a quick recap, there are four things that you need to do in order to figure out whether you can monetize your small podcast. First thing, count how many downloads you get every month. If it's not a few hundred, it's probably not worth trying to monetize. Second thing is to measure your audience loyalty. So count how many downloads you get versus how many followers you have. And if that ratio looks good, then you probably have a fairly loyal audience. Third thing, determine the value and likely spend capability of your audience based both on the content of your show as well as your Spotify demographic data. And once you've done this, you know where you fall on that grid of engagement versus value. And based on where you fall on that grid, choose the right monetization channels and implement them slowly at first to try and ramp up the money that you can make from your show, even if it is a small one. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. If you did, definitely subscribe to our show because we'd love to share more tips, more advice for our viewers. And we'd also love to hear from you what kinds of questions you have. So please do leave us a comment and I'll see you next time. Take care.